Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar, Capture Energy Incentives and Strengthen the Power Grid. I'm Jennifer Getz, the Editorial Director of Facility Executive Magazine, and this webinar is presented by C-Power. Before we get started, I'll cover a few housekeeping items. There will be a question and answer segment at the end of this presentation today. Please find the question box in the dashboard on your screen. This is where you can submit questions for our speakers today. If at any time you experience a technical difficulty, please send us a message via that question section and someone on our team will answer you privately. Now, without further ado, I'm happy to introduce your speakers for today. With 20 years of experience spanning engineering, project management, development, consulting, and sales, Nate Souls is the Vice President of C-Power's National Accounts team. With a demonstrated history of helping CNIs maximize their facility assets and distributed energy resources, Nate helps ensure C-Power's 250,000 plus education, healthcare, data centers, government, and retail customers across North America are guided to cleaner, more reliable, and cost-effective energy management initiatives. Kellen Bolentino brings more than 15 years in the energy industry to his role as Senior Account Executive National for C-Power, where he helped establish the company's presence in the Midwest market. Kevin Canoff, CEM CEP, is a campus energy engineer with the Penn State Health Milton S. Hershey Medical Center. He has extensive experience and knowledge in energy management and energy efficiency. Over the last 15 years, he has implemented over $20 million worth in energy management and energy conservation measures. Kevin has been the technical lead in adding 7.5 megawatt combustion turbine and a 275 kilowatt back pressure turbine. Additionally, he has been the lead managing the demand reduction program for Penn State Health over the last 14 years. In addition, he is on the utility budget development team and energy procurement team for Penn State Health. Well, thank you all for joining us today. And Nate, please take it away.
Great. Thank you, Jennifer. And thanks for everyone else for joining us today. I'll set the table with just an overview and a background of how we help both the power grid and our customers and why that's increasingly important to both. Kellen will speak a bit more specifically about the opportunities for facilities. And then we've got Kevin who will provide some more details of how he's benefiting as one of our customers. So to jump right into the background, C-Power is the leading virtual power plant provider. I'll address that terminology in a minute. Our roots stem from the early 2000s with the dawn of deregulated energy in the US. And pretty impressively, since 2015, we've paid our customers over $1 billion. Which we'll get into how do you get into that financial stream with Kellen. And collectively, that group of customers collectively provide about 7 gigawatts of dispatchable load across an aggregated 27,000 locations, which creates a very valuable asset to the grid operators as the need for grid flexibility continues to increase. So why, next slide, why is there a need for greater flexibility? I think most probably know the increase of renewables and their intermittency creates much more variability on the generation side of the supply and demand equation, with much less consistent fuel sources compared to traditional generation plants. The retirement of just generation infrastructure in general due to either their inherent age, financial considerations, and perhaps interest in decarbonization or emissions improvements. The recent load growth, which has been rare in the past, but growing more recently from things like data centers and their growing AI compute, the electrification of industry, more of our vehicles and everything in our homes continues to add to that growth. There's also migration of that load too, which is stressing power grids in different areas as well. In addition, more frequent weather events. We've got longer lasting heat waves in different areas. We've seen the winter storms in Texas, which make the news. damaging hurricanes, all which expose the traditional grid infrastructure to larger and faster swings in demand and the need for flexibility that makes a virtual power plant so valuable. Next slide. So I've used this term a couple of times now. What is a virtual power plant as opposed to a traditional centralized nuclear or natural gas power plant? A VPP, which you'll hear this term more and more, I think, as the DOE becomes more familiar in using these terms. It's really an aggregation of energy resources distributed across the power grid that can either be dispatched in total or more surgically to meet local constraints. It's especially helpful to balance the supply and demand in a faster, more reliably, and more affordable way than other traditional resources have in the past. It's often monetized. Virtual power plants are often monetized in a similar fashion to traditional power plant markets, as well as other strategies that are coming to the forefront as well. Next slide. So how are our customers contributing to our virtual power plant? I think it depends on how often they're available to contribute, how quickly any facility could respond, and potentially for how long they could participate in any given time frame. Many are just simply reducing loads during a very rare emergency grid event or when that need is called for. For example, industrials look for potential inflexibility to shift their schedule if the potential for that need is very infrequent. Retailers adjust highly automated and remote control air conditioning and lighting resources. Educational facilities can often utilize the same practices, but also may have more flexible loads, such as IT equipment, or more unique to their campuses. All of these, including healthcare, will utilize compliant on-site generation, in some cases traditional generation, as long as it's compliant from the EPA standpoint, and we're seeing a lot more clean generation sources there. And many across the board are starting to take advantage, or have continued to take advantage, really, this is nothing new, of newer on-site generation and storage technologies, some using third parties that we partner with as developers or energy as a service companies. And all of those add to the stack of what we call distributed energy resources that Kellen can speak to in the next slide.
Yeah, thanks, Nate. Again, when this comes back to how these resources can save money for sites and get that back to the bottom line, it's a kind of a new idea that some sites and partners that we work with come up with of where does the money come from? It's savings that are coming from the site's participation in these programs. So utilizing a curtailed load or a generator or energy efficiency projects, or even utilizing battery storage if that's coming online, that is a valuable resource to the overall grid. And so they actually put incentives out in the various deregulated markets to incentivize customers to participate in these grid programs. So these DER assets participate based on the grid's needs. And it can be as simple as, if an emergency event is called to prevent a major brownout or blackout in the market with advance notice, it could be looking at grid resiliency. If the site can participate quickly to help there, these incentives are available to the sites to claw back these savings on a monthly or annual basis. And C-Power is the kind of middle person between that. The grid doesn't have direct communication to sites' participation in these types of programs. We actually partner with the different ISOs directly to facilitate the programs for direct customers, and then have a partnership with the end-use customer. So we send out our notifications, we register the sites in the market, and they utilize these DER assets to generate revenue. When we say that, we're actually will be providing checks and payments to the site. This is not an on-bill credit or a rebate incentive that's coming back. These are real funds that are coming back to the site's bottom line and used for additional capital improvements, energy efficiency efforts, or just keeping the cost of energy down. As a lot of you may have seen in the market or in the news, there's been some increases in capacity rates across the PJM market. There's been different various weather anomalies that have been occurring that have been causing problems in the markets in Texas and California. The heat wave that's going on right now where I am in Chicago, and it's going to be coming through to the East Coast pretty soon. There's different anomalies there that are occurring and causing price spikes that customers can capitalize on with the correct assets and participation with a partner like CPower. So when we talk about this, there's different ways of sites to participate. It's not cookie cutter. You know, the sites, even though Nate talked about healthcare and retail and commercial buildings and industrials, each site has different capabilities and potential to participate. And that's one of the great things that CPower brings is our understanding and best practices and an in-house engineering team that can help the sites understand how they can participate to their best ability in each of these types of markets. So the general base demand response program is usually just based around the site's capacity. So how much the site is peaking on a monthly or seasonal basis, whether that's summer, winter, fall, and spring, and how much they're peaking there is how much they can put back to the grid to create incentives for the site. So with that, they would have their peaking amount and then how much they could send back to the grid for potential emergency. And then with that, they're actually compensated for being an on-call participant and may have to test in the market. And if no emergency events are called, they would still receive a base incentive. If an emergency event was called in the market, the sites would receive an additional incentive for participating in those programs. But again, CPower is there to notify sites with advance notice, potentially 2 hours, 30 minutes, or even day ahead advance notice for participation in those capacity programs. As sites become more familiar with the programs, they might start looking at energy prices. And when the cost of generating power for these utilities becomes very high, those costs actually come back into the market, and CPower can register the sites for their participation to reduce their electrical energy load to help the grid not have to produce as much power in the market and then receive compensation with that. And there's a twofold benefit with this. One, you're being paid by the grid for reducing your overall energy consumption for a specific amount of time, whether it's 2, 4, or 6 hours in the market. And then with that, you're also reducing your overall energy consumption. So you're saving on the power that you're not using. So a twofold benefit to sites that CPower can help manage with. Again, within the energy program, it is completely voluntary. So we would be notifying sites of when the prices hit a certain threshold that they would want to participate. And then with that, they'd be able to put themselves in the market or opt out. So there's a lot of flexibility within the energy program. Around the capacity program, it's really based around emergency events and test events, and you do really need to participate in those to realize the full benefit. As we get farther along down the line, it's coming into the ancillary services, which are more flexible load participation. We're looking at sites that have sophisticated SCADA system, building automation systems, on-site generation with seamless transfer, or even battery storage. And these assets would most likely be dispatched or receive a signal from CPower to participate in the market programs. And with that, the signal is sending a notification of the asset to participate. The asset would then switch over power to generation or reduce power on a building automation system, or even switch over on a battery asset in a very fast fashion. Usually we're looking at between 10 to 15 minutes of notification, the asset would switch over and the power's back to the grid. The great thing about these ancillary programs is these are not long duration events. They might be lasting 10 to 15 or 30 minutes. And for most instances, it's not enough time for a person on site to really realize that there's been a shift in temperature in comparison to a capacity event or an energy event where we're looking at long duration 2, 4, 6 hour curtailments where we may see some changes in temperature at the site. So with each of these programs, there's a lot of flexibility for the site to choose what's the best program for them to participate in. I like to use the analogy of crawl, walk, run. We're not going to meet someone and talk to them and throw them right into the ancillary program or the energy program. We're going to make sure that they can at least participate in the base capacity program and respond to a test event or respond to a ISO signal around an emergency event. If we do get down that path and the site does have capabilities for energy and ancillary participation, we'll definitely pursue that with the site, but a lot more flexibility for the site to participate. And that's definitely, sorry. That's definitely something that we offer within the market is market flexibility for sites to participate in programs that are the best suit and best fit for them. Sorry about my dog. So, and again, with that, I just mentioned 3 options of programs, but there actually are 60 programs that CPower manages across the United States. And again, a fun thing for us is that none of the programs are the same. So each ISO from California to ISO New England have different nuances to program participation in the market. So there's different registration windows, there's different times that the events can be called, different durations that the events can be called, different nuances in how sites can participate. And then when we get into each of these different regions, there's also nuances in if generation is approved or allowed to participate in the market as well. So we also have an in-house engineering team, an in-house registration team that helps facilitate that for the sites. If the sites do have generation, we would have to do a FERC review of the generator to see if it's approved for participation in the market, but also if the sites do not have any generation or are just looking at a load curtailment, we do create curtailment strategies and understand how the sites are going to participate and meet the requirements from the grid's participation in those programs. So there's a lot of front end work that has to be done, but as we've been doing this for a number of years, Nate and I, with 15 plus years of experience in the market, each customer is different, but once they are in the market and participating, they usually stay in the market for quite a long time. I think our overall retention rate is around 98% in the market, which is a great testament to our company and our people, but also that these recurring incentives that people are able to capture back, they don't want to let them go. So as markets shift and things change in the market, they can make adjustments and move into different programs, and CPower is there to help facilitate that for them. So we find different ways for customers to participate in the market while continuing to bring incentives back. And then from the virtual power plants, not only on the financial side, but what other benefits are really coming back to customers. I think one thing that I missed talking about a little bit at the top end was not only are the financial incentives there, and that's great, but also for all of these sites, working with a partner like CPower, you're receiving advance notice of potential grid outages or grid emergencies that are occurring. Usually a utility won't call you 2 hours in advance or a day ahead that there's going to be a major outage in your particular utility market or in your market. And so with that, we offer additional resiliency and reliability for your site to have advance notice of these potential outages, which again is great to have your generator ready with fuel, look at the outlook of a schedule that's coming up. If an emergency event is occurring, do we need to turn down or turn off certain production lines or certain equipment so that we don't have a major outage or concern on production, safety concerns, or equipment concerns that might be shut down abruptly if there is an outage. So having that advance notice from a partner like CPower offers a lot more than just financial incentives, but reliability and resiliency for your site to not be kind of just out of the blue having your whole plant coming down because of a major outage on the grid. So we really do try to give as much advance notice as possible, but we're all, working to try to work on that. And then on the sustainability side, looking at greenhouse gas emissions and your scope 2 emission goals, as you're looking at these types of different assets that are coming into the market, looking at ways to offset the payment of those and continue to be a strong supporter of a green environment. These sustainable efforts with participation here, you're going to be able to get LEED certification or LEED points by participating in a DR program, as well as looking at ways to offset your overall carbon footprint by working in against high prices of generation and reducing your overall consumption at those times. So within these various markets, as I mentioned in the previous map, We're in 5 major ISOs and some direct utility programs. I'm going to go through each of these at a high level. I know that some of the folks on the call may not be in some of these markets, but that does not mean these programs aren't available with your direct utility or direct coordination with the utility that it has. So in the PJM market, which goes from ComEd in Illinois all the way to the East Coast and PJM, has been probably the longest standing demand response program in the US. I think for about 30 plus years, they've been running a program. And so is kind of the mainstay for a lot of the other ISOs and looking at PJM and what they're doing, but they all do coordinate and communicate together. But PJM probably has the largest footprint of customers participating in demand response programs. There's been a bit of a lull in the capacity prices associated with participation in PJM for the last 3 years. But most recently at the end of July, all the PJM prices actually went up by 10x. So most customers are looking at around $100,000 per megawatt fee on the capacity side. And this is a great way to capture back a large portion of that spend that you have on your capacity prices, as well as in PJM for assets that, or for sites that have battery storage assets. They have a frequency regulation and fast acting program that is very lucrative to the market. So for solar and storage incentives, it does really help back with the ROI. In the ERCOT market, with continued weather anomalies that are occurring and grid constraints, as it is an island within itself for an ISO, they're always looking at new ways to bring generation on the grid. So they do have potential that even though your site may have a peaking load of 1 or 2 megawatts, but you have a generator for 4 megawatts for extended periods, you can actually inject that energy back into the grid. So there's a lot of options in the ERCOT market for additional incentives. And since events are called and you might be utilizing some of those assets or might be curtailing in advance notice, there's heavy additional incentives for when you do curtail. And those events are becoming more frequent. They used to be about every 5 or 6 years, and now we're looking at about every 2 years, a major event in the ERCOT market is called. In the Northeast, they are making significant changes around DER assets. C-Power in particular has a program in the Northeast around adding battery storage and financing battery storage at particular sites that meet requirements in that market. It's called efficiency as, or energy as a service. And so within that program, we would actually be able to put a battery storage device at the site to participate in various programs and partner with the site for 10 or 15 years with a shared savings model that the site would be receiving incentives while having that full resiliency of a battery asset and recouping savings on that as well. And then in the New York market, they just opened up a new DER participation model, increasing the incentives heavily in the New York market for customers to participate with not only battery storage and generation, but general load curtailment, opening up new programs for incentives for customers to curtail. The California ISO also on the forefront of a lot of battery storage and trying to reduce overall emissions. And the ISO, they've increased their incentives for battery storage, but have very high prices on the capacity side as well. So in general, this is a great market to be looking at participation in a number of programs, but they are continuously trying to update their market participation with the change in market growth of DER assets, generation, and storage assets, and are constantly trying to incentivize customers to participate. But again, another market that has quite a bit of weather anomalies between wildfires and heat waves. Events are called. So for these sites there, it's great to look into assets that they can put in to create resiliency and make sure that they're recouping back as much of these savings as possible. And the MISO market, which is not a new market for C-Power to participate in, but has recently gotten some attention where a few of the utilities have been retiring coal-fired generation, which has caused some serious constraints on the grid and the market prices. This is a different market where most of the other markets are based on a flat capacity cost or energy cost that comes through. But in MISO, because of C-Power's position, we're actually able to pay customers more than they're paying in the capacity market through different acquisitions that we have with the generation side. So customers that participate can receive up to 2.5 to 3x what they're paying in capacity for participation in the market, but is again a growing market right now. We have the Illinois, Michigan, and Missouri markets covered, but the other markets are not opened up because of state compliance issues. So the states don't allow demand response providers to offer services, but that should be opening up soon as more demand for these types of DER resources is coming in. And I'm going to be handing it off to Kevin Kanoff to talk a little bit about Penn State.
Well, thank you. I am the campus energy engineer for Penn State Health Milton S. Hershey Medical Center. We are the Pennsylvania State University's College of Medicine, or its academic medical center with its College of Medicine, located in Hershey, Pennsylvania. So we're within the PJM grid. And what I'd like to do is just talk a bit about what happens at our facility, size, and those kinds of things, and then talk about what we've done for demand response, and then what the future looks like for us. So we are about 4.6 million square feet on our main electrical account, and within that we have a 628 bed hospital, which includes a level 1 trauma center for both children and adults. We do heart transplants, organ transplants, all of those types of things. Major node in the medical system, the major spot in between Pittsburgh and Philadelphia. So within that, we have the College of Medicine, and most people don't realize it, but College of Medicine is primarily is predominated by research labs. So we have a lot of high percentages of outside air, 100% most of the time. And then on the hospital side, we have the high air changes per hour required for best practices in healthcare. So 20 air changes per hour in the OR, 16 air changes within procedure rooms. So that's really what drives our demand. And as you can see here, we have a peak demand when we have the highest enthalpies around 23 megawatts. So from there, the way we do demand response to this point in time has been to manage our chilled water production. And so we're in the capacity market here in PJM, and for about 3.6 megawatts of reduction. So we do have various two primary ways that we manage that capacity. But before I get into the actual what we do, in 2010, our electric market became deregulated, and as a facility that always thinks worst case scenario, an energy management program had been put together and started, and that's when I started with the facility. So we have a comprehensive energy management program with reducing the energy intensity, but then also looking at the demand, looking at our peak load contribution tags. So on the next slide, I would like to, if we can change, we talk about how we've managed our capacity tag. So we put in a combustion turbine that took us from a tag of about 18.5 megawatts down to about 12.5 megawatts. So that was a significant thing that we did. So that's a system that's making about half of our power, the kilowatt hours. But on a summer day, it's a 7.5 megawatt unit, so it's producing about 6.3 megawatts in the heat of the summer. So that had a major impact on our tag. But so far as our capacity management, we use a 1.4 million gallon chilled water storage tank, which will flow at, when we flow at full capacity, we can drop about just a little under 2 megawatts with that, because we're pulling, chillers back. Our chillers are reducing their output as we switch over to the chilled water storage tank. Additionally, because we're a large facility with a large building automation system, we do have significant common areas that are not critical areas. So we have a button, within the BAS where we put, have our operators push, and that gives us another megawatt or so of demand reduction. So those two are the primary way that we've been reducing our capacity. And as you can imagine, with the size facility we have a lot of generators. Unfortunately, most of those generators, we did a study on usefulness, they sit around 25% useful. So, but we do have about 6 generators that we can use close to 100% usefulness. And it's been our mentality not to use generators. So that's kind of our look to the future, is what can we do with these generators, and what other ways can we enter into the demand response market? And earlier this calendar year, we started looking at this with anticipation of the July auction. And we started a study on the impact of using our generators on our emissions agreements, permits. So that's in progress right now, to see if that's an option for us or not. What's the pros and cons of using the generators. And when I say we haven't used generators for 20 years, that's something that's kind of hands off. But with the market, the way it's changing and everything, and it's something that we're looking at pretty hard to do for the future. In addition, we continue to look at opportunities to generate power on site. In my bio, it was mentioned we have a back pressure turbine, and we have district steam, so we have the opportunity to do that type of thing where we set a turbine in parallel to our pressure reducing station, our main one, and we have 12 other ones that we're looking at right now, what we can do to provide for that. So those types of things, looking at other additional behind the meter generation that could maybe knock down that tag or somehow be used in the capacity market or other markets, other demand response markets. So we're working with CPower on what are our opportunities to enter into some of the other markets now that they're more financially viable with the higher numbers. Our transmission tag in our distribution area is 104,000 per megawatt as well. So any kind of management on capacity tag and transmission tag has a pretty high dollar impact for our facility. So with having said all that, I'm going to push it back over to the guys.
Thank you, Kevin. Appreciate it. And so we have a couple other items on some other case studies that we have in the PJM market that might be pertinent to the group as well. Nate, I don't know if you wanted to speak on metal technologies or want me to handle it.
Why don't you cover it, and then it looks like we have a little bit of time, so we can be maybe cover this one, and we can go to questions after that, if that's all right.
Yeah, sounds good. So Metal Technologies has been a long-standing customer of CPower. I don't know the exact duration, but I think it's for five or 7+ years. Again, metal in the metallurgical industry. And so participating in a number of CPower programs is a great example of participating in the emergency capacity, economic or price responsive, flexible participation in sync reserves, as well as they're looking into our capacity peak demand and transmission peak demand program in their market. So a very versatile customer with the ability to receive a signal from CPower's system, and they have a centralized control system and hit the stop production button very quickly and can participate easily in these programs. But that has not, happened over just the course of a few months. This has been a longstanding process of working with this site and building up their comfort level into these various programs and finding different ways for them to participate in curtailment through different operational reduction measures. So they're utilizing CPower as a way to bring in savings to the site for capital improvements, but also being a good energy respondent to the market, looking at this as a way to be resilient and responsible to the grid, that if an emergency is called or an event is called, they're going to be participating to assist the grid, but also receiving that advance notice that if an event were coming through, they do have strenuous processes in place. They can curtail quickly, but they don't want to be kind of notified of it in a short window. They want to be able to curtail and make sure that every safety and equipment processes are handled appropriately. Nate, anything else you want to add?
No, I think we're good. I think let's check the potential for questions. I think we've got
Hi.
yeah,
Well, hi. Well, I just want to thank you all first, Nate, Kevin, Kellen, for giving this presentation today. And I want to thank our audience for submitting some questions for you guys today. So I'm just going to get started here. It looks like we have a question from Henry. So most of our business operations are critical. Can we still participate in these programs?
Yeah, Kellen, you want to take that? I think Kevin actually spoke to some of the critical nature of their business, but Kellen.
Yeah, I think even for critical sites, it's important that one, you're getting and receiving notification of these potential emergency events that are coming through. And this is a question that we've had a number of times of we can't shut down, we never would. And I always make the analogy of, well, if the utility called you and said, hey, the power's going out at your site in 2 hours, what are you going to do? It's the same idea. You're going to have advance notice of these potential emergency events by participating with a partner like CPower. The utilities usually won't call you with 2 hours advance notice. You might just have your power out. So having a critical facility, it's maybe more important that you're participating in these programs so that you can have a curtailment strategy in place and have a process in place to make those curtailment measures so that if an emergency event were called, you're prepared to participate and have things shut down so that you don't have a major equipment failures or safety concerns. I bring up equipment, but safety is probably paramount in most instances as well, to make sure that no one is hurt and there's no issues there.
I would also say that even in critical facilities, there's often some flexibility in the usage in some area of the facility. Now, oftentimes we're not asking for an entire plant shut down or anything like that. That's never really the goal of anybody to be professional, grid services providers, right? There's often some sort of ancillary load that can be utilized. And I would also say that of our customers that have participated, even from a small amount relative to their total load, their understanding of their flexibility has given them a leg up in both their operational understanding, but as well as sort of just the logistics of getting approvals for how to make modifications to their operations or their operational flexibility. And that's not just important for times of emergencies. If you have a rate change, if the rate change increases dramatically, understanding where you have some flexibility, you're one step ahead of anybody else who's kind of taken aback by, oh my gosh, what are we going to do? And understanding that is a fantastic case. And I think, I don't know if Kevin, you have any instances there? I think you can probably commiserate with others in getting approvals for what you have.
Yeah, certainly we're a critical facility with 40 ORs, and there's people on the table all the time when we're doing our curtailment. So it's something that takes a lot of thought, takes some effort to think through, but it does benefit our facility to participate and our engineers to understand our systems better and what we can and can't do throughout the various situations. So yeah, I would say it's been, a good exercise for our team to have done this over the last decade.
Awesome. Thank you, guys. It looks like we have another question here from Jane, actually. So how often will we be called on to curtail load?
It depends on the program. So in the base emergency demand response program, at the minimum, there's usually a test notification, which you can receive day ahead or week ahead notice associated with that. And then an emergency event, you can sometimes receive day ahead or a few hour advance notice of the emergency event being dispatched, depending on the market. The other programs, the energy program or economic and the flexible programs, those are usually within a day ahead notice, and then the site has the option to opt in or opt out. But then when you get into the fast response type programs, you usually are in market unless you've taken yourself out within 24 hours, and you have between 10 to 30 minutes to respond to a notification there. So again, as we go down the line of that crawl, walk, run, when you're in the run, you're kind of in the market close to 24/7, depending on the site's operating hours. But then there's more flexibility within the emergency and energy program for participation and advance notice. But again, all depends on the site's operating hours. We can't put somebody in when there's no energy being pulled. So it has to really depend on when the energy's there for it to be pushed back to the grid.
Perfect. Nate, Kevin, do you guys have anything else to add there, or?
In terms of frequency of events as well, again, with the crawl, walk, run, we're probably addressing, one test event, maybe a real event in some of these sort of the crawl examples as a minimum, and oftentimes those can be some of the more lucrative. So stacking that type of program as a foundation seems like a logical first step for anybody dipping a toe into this market.
Perfect. Awesome. It looks like we have another question from Elena. So how do I know if my generators are compliant?
Yeah, great question. So actually, that's something that C-Power would take on. So we have an in-house engineering team. We just need a couple pieces of information to run an initial review, a picture of the generator nameplate, air permit, or emissions report, or recent maintenance review of the generator. And again, our in-house engineering team will run that full review. We just need a couple pieces of information to do that. And even if the generator is not approved for participation for whatever reason, if it does have the option to have a retrofit or a simple update to it, we can provide some high-level estimates of what that would be, and then bring that back to the provider of the generator to see if the cost is. Usually what we're finding is that it can be less than a year ROI, depending on the program participation for that retrofit. And then once that's done, the generator's compliant in the market for, I'd say, the next 20 years or so until the generator needs to be replaced. These stipulations that were put through by FERC about 5 or 6 years ago are not going to be changing anytime soon. So the stipulations that are in place are kind of the standards for the long haul.
Perfect. Awesome. So another question we have is from Martin. What times of day/week would my business be asked to participate?
Sure, yeah, great question. Again, it really depends on the site's operating hours. So if it's more of a 9 to 5 facility or a 2-shift or 3-shift type facility, there can be nuances of when the site would be called upon for an emergency event. It's usually around those peak times. We're looking at the afternoons from maybe 1 to 6 p.m. that an event could be called. There are instances where there have been weekend events, and that happened in PJM in 2022 when an event was called on December 23rd and 24th. Not usually the case when that happens. Usually they're during the week when the grid is fully constrained and all these facilities are up and running. But for some of these programs, the sites can actually choose when they want to be dispatched for participation. They can kind of choose the hours that would best fit them for the economic and flexible program. But yeah, there's some variances there, but mostly for the emergency or capacity type program, you're in market for a specific amount of hours, and then how the site can participate.
Yeah, and I think, Kellen, it also speaks to some of the shifts or changes we've seen in the marketplace, and speaks to the need for flexibility in the grids. Like I mentioned, the migrating loads, and in some cases, fuel scarcity or demand increases. Oftentimes we saw areas where the peak problem was mostly a summer problem. In the late afternoon is when you might see that show its challenge. But the event around Christmas time in the Mid-Atlantic area a year and a half ago really was in the wintertime, obviously, and speaks to more winter need in some of these cases as well, with constraints popping up in those areas.
Well, Nate, Kellen, Kevin, thank you so much again for this presentation today. It looks like we're just about out of time, but I wanted to thank you for going over this with our audience.
Yeah, thank you so much. And again, if people have further questions that we didn't answer in the chat, we will try to follow up with the group as well. Or if you have specific questions that you want to ask me, my contact information is up there now. So you can take a quick screenshot, feel free to email or call me, and happy to discuss the specific market questions that you might have and how we can help out.
And a recording from today's session will be made available on our magazine's website, facilityexecutive.com, and on cpowerenergy.com. Again, thank you for watching and have a wonderful afternoon, everyone.
Thank you all.
Thank you all.